everybody, Fully here. Welcome to the weekly news recap for the 20th to the 26th of October 2025. So, this week there were a couple of showcases. The first one up is the Indie Horror Showcase, not to be confused with the Indie Horror Game Award Showcase or something else. Anyway, here's the Steam landing page if you want to check out all of the games that they showed off. I'm just going to show you a couple here that I hadn't seen before and I thought were pretty interesting. So first up is Krathos Deep. It's got some pretty strong Soma elements to it, but I do think it's going for more of a Lovecraft kind of thing. So you're being brought to the bottom of the ocean. You're manning a drone that's going about kind of exploring and uncovering different things. You can see some whale skeletons there, which is disconcerting, but also discovering things like strange monoliths at the bottom of the ocean and strange megastructures and so on and so forth. And it all becomes very Cthulhu very quickly. Anyway, not a whole lot to the game so far, just being revealed. It's Krathos Deep, wishlisted on Steam. In fact, you can wishlist basically everything on Steam here. God Help Us All is a kind of Western, old school survival horror. So you're kind of setting the scene here. You've got some kind of mysterious traveler guy who doesn't seem to be affected by whatever disease or whatever illness is going around the area at the moment. And there's a little bit of like combat where he's fighting horrible creatures and what have you. Yeah, so it's kind of like an old school survival horror with the fixed camera angles and stuff like that, but I can't think of too many, at least off the top of my head, survival horrors that were set in the Wild West. Yeah, I can't think of any. Anyway, moving on. Am I Nima also has a demo available if you're interested. So Am I Nima is a kind of psychological horror kind of thing. So you are playing Nima, who has woken up with no memory, only to find that this woman is keeping her captive in this house. And the implication is that you're her daughter, and she's trying to make sure that you are her daughter. So a lot of the game is convincing your mother, maybe, question mark, that you are her daughter. And to do that, you're like exploring the house, exploring the environment, collecting clue words and putting those clue words together and stuff like that. But you might not be her daughter. Or maybe you are and there's something wrong with you, or maybe a bunch of other things. So yeah, check out the demo if you're interested. But yeah, there might be something to the girl. Cold Abyss is almost Krathos Deep, but like PS1, PS2 graphics in some ways. Anyway, you're being thrown into the bottom of the ocean again. You're doing like maintenance for undersea cables and stuff like that. So it's a bit of more of a, well, it's not a walking simulator exactly, it's a swimming simulator, I guess. The deal of it is you're repairing undersea cables and stuff like that. But as it transpires, the cable may not actually be a cable. It might be a big tentacle. Anyway, I think there's a demo for that one available as well, if you're interested. The Dropouts, again, didn't have a whole lot to show off. So kind of the gist of the Dropouts is you are at a school, maybe a university, not clear. 12 students have gone missing. The administration end of things is to say that they just ran off. So it's a boarding school. It's not like they're expected to come and go. They're expected to obviously live there, and 12 of them have gone missing. And again, it does look like the administration is trying to sweep it under the rug. So yeah, I think kind of the gist of the game is kind of figuring out what happened to the missing students. But as I said, there's not a whole lot about the game right now. And it does look like it is a French developer, I think, from the in-game assets anyway. So something to look, keep an eye on, I think, going forward. And last one from the Indie Horror. As I said, there were a lot of games on the Indie Horror Showcase. I'm just showing you a few of the ones that I thought were interesting. So The Secrets of Weepstone is kind of bringing you back to like the very early Dungeons and Dragons games, like Edition 1, which was very harsh and very easy to die, but was also very much a combat dungeon crawler type game. It wasn't really a big storytelling thing. And that's kind of what Weepstone is. It's a little bit, I don't know, first person, what's it called, Darkest Dungeon in some ways. Like, it's very brutal, very punishing combat. You are expected to die, or your characters are expected to die fairly often, kind of thing. But its presentation is really nice, and it does do a pretty good job of displaying how punishing, I guess, very early Dungeons and Dragons was. Anyway, that wasn't the only showcase this week, though. There was also the Galaxies Autumn Showcase. So there's the Galaxy Showcase twice a year. You can check out it there. There's a landing page, and I think there's a Steam landing page as well. Again, I'm just going to highlight some of the games that I thought were interesting. So this is Defect. Obviously, you guys can't hear it, but Mick Gordon is doing the music for it. The music is really, really good. Defect is giving a little bit of like Blade Runner, Judge Dredd kind of vibe to it. It's like you're just the there's no law, there's no judge, jury, whatever. You're just like the executioner or whatever. You come in and kill the guys you're told to kill, what have you. I was really on board for it when I thought it was a single player game, because I thought, cool, like first person Judge Dredd kind of thing, work your way up the tower, deal with like some NPC partners or what have you. But no, that's not what it is. This is a PvE arena shooter thing, unfortunately. So there's like 3 different factions. You can play the police, you can play the defects, and there's a 3rd faction that I'm not 100% on. I think it's just like heavy tech use guys, I guess, in some ways. There are 3 factions, that's all I really know. And apparently you can jump between them, because in this case here you have the police running with the defect guy, so just because you start off as one faction doesn't mean you'll finish the level as the same faction. You can jump around, but I think the gist of it is that you'll still be on the same team, but your consciousness has jumped to a different character type or a different class type or what have you, which is an interesting concept, but unfortunately it's PvP, so I won't be touching it. Anyway, moving on. Silver Pines. Silver Pines is Twin Peaks. Is Twin Peaks the game in some ways. So you're there, you're investigating the disappearance of a musician, but it definitely has a lot of the Twin Peaks kind of characters. There's a big kind of vibe, I guess, for Twin Peaks to it. But of course, there's also like combat and survival horror elements to it as well, which is very much not Twin Peaks. It's maybe a little bit more Deadly Premonition. But yeah, the presentation looks really good. So hoping to see a little bit more about Silver Pines in the future. Quantic River we've actually seen before. I just wanted to put it out here because it has started its Kickstarter campaign. If you are interested in checking that out, I haven't backed it yet, but I probably will pretty soon. So yeah, this is kind of showing off a little bit more of the combat. It's got a really great presentation. It's a little bit like stop motion animation for the character, but I think it kind of works really well. I think I skipped past a lot of the actual gameplay. There's like a very brief snippet of gameplay here. Yeah, so there's a little bit of parkour, a little bit of kind of like stilted animations, but I do think it actually kind of lends itself pretty well to the game. And to the presentation. Anyway, we'll see how that works out. It does look like it's side-scrolling Ghost Runner in some ways, which isn't, it's not a bad thing. Cthulhu, the Cosmic Abyss is Cold Abyss and Kratham Deep again, but with a bit more of a budget this time around. It has actual voice acting and so on. I mean, the other games had voice acting too, but yeah, I don't know. It just has clearly had more money put into it, but it is a similar kind of game. You're dropped to the bottom of the ocean. Lovecraftian shenanigans transpire. I do feel this one's a little bit more not subtle about the whole thing, whereas the other ones seemed a little bit more subtle about it. Anyway, still, I love myself some Lovecraftian horror, so can keep an eye on that. And then the last one, Skinwalker, kind of pixel art thing. It has a little bit of like carrying to it. So you are playing the Skinwalker. And I think the gist of the game is that you're infected kind of early on in the game. You're trying to make your way back to your daughter, but at the same time, you know, you're going to be worried that you might accidentally kill your daughter because you're this horrible creature thing now. But the key art for the game, also there was a giant ape not sure what's going on there. Anyway, the key arc for the game is kind of fun in that like you are this horrible creature thing, but you're also escorting your daughter away from like the police and stuff like that. Like that art there. Like I just think that's kind of fun. Anyway, we don't have any what's the word? Release dates or anything like that. Anyway, that was from the showcases this week. There was another one, which is Dames for Games or Ghouls for Games. It was the horror version of it, or the Halloween version, but it was a lot of crossover with a lot of games we've already seen. Anyway, still good. Outside of the showcases, though, we had Project Tal was shown off by Mad Engine, a developer. I think is a Chinese developer. I think. Yeah, this kind of struck me at the beginning that this was another Soulsy type thing, not unlike Black Myth Wukong or Wushang Fallen Feathers or, you know, these kind of games. But the more of the trailer that goes past, it kind of looks like Dragon's Dogma, really, a little bit more. It's not clear if this is like multiplayer and it's like multiple players are playing, or if these are NPC friends. But stuff like this, like catching you, the shield guy coming in to protect you, like that's like textbook Dragon's Dogma. Quintessential Dragon's Dogma, we'll say. And, you know, fighting these big characters, being able to chop off their pieces, being able to climb on top of them and stuff like that. Again, which is also very Dragon's Dogma. Even some of the character classes you're seeing, similar enough. So yeah, like this could be another Dragon's Dogma, which would be good because there's really only the one game that's doing it, which is Dragon's Dogma. Anyway, so more games that are like that wouldn't be a bad thing. Anyway. But, you know, remains to be seen if that's actually what this is, or if it is in fact a multiplayer Souls-like thing. Anyway, that's Project Tal. That's all we know about it. There hasn't been like a release date or more to come or anything like that. Okay, so first of what will be a pretty heavy Microsoft and Xbox episode, Halo is making its way to PS5, so Sony finally has a Halo killer. It's Halo. Daddy away. So Campaign Evolved is just kind of the main story, the main campaign of the original Halo that's just been remastered, higher fidelity graphics, some quality of life improvements. There's been some additions to the game as well. There's a couple of prequel missions take place before what would have been the first mission in the game. And I don't know if that's maybe to set up for stuff that happens in Halo 2, Halo 3, what have you. It's kind of a flyby of the different areas. A little bit of gameplay. I never played the original Halo. Like, yes, this looks better, okay, but like, how much of this is part of the original Halo? How much of this is new and added? I don't know. I do believe they've added more skulls, which are the kind of difficulty alteration things for the game. So there's more here, like even if you've played the original to death, there's more for you to check out with the Campaign Evolved game. And obviously, if you've been a Sony fanboy forever, you may have never played Halo, which is like me. Possibly we'll have to see what all the fuss was about. Anyway, coming 2026, there's been some allegations that generative AI was used to make the game. What exactly was used, we don't know. They haven't been forthcoming about it, so we're not entirely sure. Anyway, so the legendary campaign from Halo Combat Evolved, it's coming back. It's going to be called Campaign Evolved instead. So the full campaign returns. Every mission has been enhanced with high-definition visuals, new cinematics. There's some quality of life changes. Controls have been modified a little bit. Soundtrack has been remastered, which would be interesting to hear. 9 additional weapons. So it looks like they've taken some weapons that were in later games and added it back into the original game. Some new challenges added in. As I said, a couple of brand new prequel missions. 4-player co-op, 2-player split screen. 2026, someday. Same day on PlayStation, so you won't have to wait what is usually like 6 months or a year. It's like Xbox exclusives make their way over to PlayStation. So yeah, that's end of an era, I think, on the console wars. Like, this is it, really. I know I said like Microsoft Flight Simulator was the end of it, and I still kind of maintain that really was the the final nail in the coffin, but it really does feel like Halo is like, we've now pushed all of the dirt on top of the coffin and put a tombstone on top. Like, yeah, it's the tombstone on the grave, I guess, at this point. Anyway, moving on. Sinking City 2 has been delayed out to next year because they're in the middle of a war zone, basically. If you're not familiar, Frogwares, the developer, is based in Ukraine and has effectively been dealing with power outages, missile strikes, like all sorts of shit that's obviously going to make development a little bit difficult. Anyway, pushed out to the first half of 2026, developing a game amid the war between Russia and Ukraine. I wouldn't characterize it that way, really. Ukraine didn't start the war and don't want the war. Anyway, there's been no concrete new date, so they're just saying first half 2026, so before the end of June, I guess. So coming from publishing head Sergey Oganesian. No, didn't say that right. Oganesian? Yep. No. Anyway, developing a game during a war isn't something you can ever really prepare for, but something you need to keep adapting to. At one point, we were losing power for days as drones and missiles hit our power grid. When that tactic stopped working, it became mass drone swarms every other night, going from midnight until dawn. You work all day, then spend the sleepless night listening for explosions, and somehow still need to function the next morning. These things all slowed us down. It's probably not surprisingly here. To the point where it just doesn't make sense to try to rush out what we have left to meet a date that we no longer feel is worth chasing. How Moscow's tactics to terrorize civilians will change again as winter comes in is anyone's guess. We'd rather be ready to adapt again, knowing we're able to take our time. So yeah, we don't have an exact date, but like, we're in the middle of a war zone, guys. If the game comes out at all, it might be a miracle. Anyway, so coming to the second half of October, Xbox has its second wave of Xbox Game Pass games, and it's actually pretty decent. So The Outer Worlds 2 we'll talk about, and Power Wash Simulator 2 we'll talk about later because those are two brand new games. Football Manager 26 is here twice for some reason. One of them's the console edition, one of them's the PC version, only for all Ultimates. In fact, all of this is Ultimate, really. The only two that are coming to premium are these two games. Bounty Star, also, we'll talk about later because that is also a new release. I can't read that. I'll have to go back and check the other thing. Halls of Torment, I think, is actually also a day one game, but Halls of Torment has been on PC for a while. It is a Vampire Survivors type game, but it has the like Diablo 1, Diablo 2 aesthetic to it. So it's like isometric, early 3D art. It's actually a lot of fun, but bearing in mind it is effectively Vampire Survivors. And 1000x Resist, 1000 times Resist, also has been out on PC for a good while. It's a very strong narrative game. Is very much Nier Automata, in that you're in a bunker. There's been some kind of post-apocalyptic thing. You are fighting to preserve mankind, but maybe you haven't been told the full story, which is pretty much Nier Automata. Okay, what is that game? Something Kingdom. Super Fantasy Kingdom. This is also a day one, so all of them were day one games almost. Rebuild Your Kingdom, Explore Fantasy World, Roguelike City Builder. Good God, no. Alright, moving on. Over on the Epic Games Store, you have till Thursday to pick up Fear the Spotlight for free. This, I think, was one of the first Blumhouse games, published games. Fear the Spotlight is an atmospheric third-person horror adventure with a disturbing mystery to unravel. Sneak into school after hours, survive a seance gone wrong, solve puzzles, and stay away from this guy with the big spotlight on his head. It's pretty good, actually, from playing it. I have not finished it. I've only played like a little bit of it. But yeah, from what I have played, it's a pretty decent game. Anyway, those are some of the games you can play soon. What if you wanted to play something right now? Well, it seems like they were listening to me last week when I said not much was going to be coming out. Because all of the fucking games came out this week. All right, so we have The Outer Worlds 2. Technically, Microsoft would like you to believe that its real release date is next week and that you're paying for early access, but let's be real, all the reviews came out this week. The game is out this week. Anyway, if you want to, you can pay to play it before the weekend. That's pretty much what you're paying for. Anyway, The Outer Worlds 2 from Obsidian. From what I have read from reviews, there's a lot of, or rather not too many changes from the first game. It's kind of like an evolution on it rather than like a big drastic change or anything. So it's still a lot of the first game to it. So take of that what you will. If you didn't like the first game, you may not like this one too much. On the other hand, I kind of liked it. Like, yeah, I would have preferred if it was a much deeper game, and coming from stuff like New Vegas, I kind of expected it to be a much deeper game, but I think it was all right. It wasn't amazing. Then also we have Ninja Gaiden 4, also coming from Xbox, so there's a little bit of cannibalism here of eating your own sales. Anyway, Ninja Gaiden 4, kind of resurrecting the Ninja Gaiden series. Hard as nails, ninja combat kind of thing. This time around, there are two protagonists. You have Ria Hayabusa from the original games, as well as new guy, Ryu something or other. This time around being made by Platinum Games. Team Ninja, I think, are only there as a sort of supervisory role. Like, the major development would have been done by Platinum. So it's going to be a little bit different because gameplay-wise, it may feel a little bit different. But from, again, what I've read from reviews, yeah, it's still really fucking hard. Maybe not quite as hard as Ninja Gaiden 2, but definitely still very, very difficult. And very, very bloody. So, you know, a return to form in some ways. Next up, speaking of bloody, I guess Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. It's been in development hell for an extremely long time. It's been both started and stopped and changed developers and so on. So there's finally a game out, and reviews have been a bit mixed on it. I think people coming at it from the original game and expecting a sequel in the same kind of vein. That pun was not intended. Expecting, you know, a similar type of game. Disappointed because it isn't. It's not that kind of game. It's very much more of a first-person action game that has RPG elements to it, rather than a first-person computer RPG like the original game. But if you were, you know, already well aware that it wasn't going to be that kind of game, it's a fun action RPG, has kind of vampire abilities to it. Depending on which type of vampire, which vampire clan you start as, you have different abilities available to you. There's a fair bit of replay value there as well. And the Chinese room, like, usually does good presentation. Still Wakes the Deep. Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, like that kind of thing. The game at least looks very good. But this is also probably their first, like, heavy action game that they've ever made. At least as the Chinese room. It's not to say that the developers who are there haven't made an action game before. But yeah, reviews are a little bit mixed. But again, if you were expecting it to be effectively gameplay-wise a sequel to the original game, it's not. If you were expecting it to be more of a spiritual successor kind of thing, yeah, that's kind of more what we're going for here. Anyway, moving on. Some smaller games now. Power Wash Simulator 2 is now out. Again, this potentially might be a game only for me. But I don't know, it seems pretty popular. Maybe other people like the game too. Anyway, it's effectively more of the same. It's just got kind of different scenarios. You've got different tools available to you now. And the gameplay, presentation-wise, the game looks a bit nicer. The water looks like water now, properly, kind of water effects. You can kind of see the water trickle down like different surfaces and stuff like that, which you didn't really see in the original game. And you've got this kind of base to outfit and stuff like that. And I think co-op, campaign co-op is now a thing. And I don't think it was a thing in the original one. I think you could only do like bespoke, or not bespoke, but specific levels multiplayer. Anyway, moving on. Tormented Souls 2. This is a sequel, obviously, to the original Tormented Souls, which is a throwback to like old survival horror. There's an awful lot of Resident Evil remake in Tormented Souls 1 and 2. So yeah, it's continuing the story of half-blind girl, I forget her name, takes her sister to what's supposed to be a wellness retreat kind of thing. But yeah, they have some interesting services, I guess, going on here. Anyway, yeah, you need to rescue your sister from evil nuns. That's kind of Tormented Souls. And you get a nail gun, which is pretty hardcore. Anyway, moving on. Dispatch. So Dispatch is like one of the first games from what used to be Telltale Games. A lot of developers who used to be part of it and like branched off to make their own thing. So Dispatch is you are playing a former superhero who is now on the dispatch side of things, has to assign superheroes to different like issues and stuff like that. And along the way, you have choices to make, obviously. And in the Telltale style of things, how many of those choices actually matter, how many of them will actually change anything, and so on and so forth. You'll find out. Anyway, that's Dispatch. This may be inappropriate for some users, I guess. Painkiller. So, again, another series kind of being resurrected. In a lot of ways, Painkiller was kind of seen as a bit of a Doom clone. Slight difference with Painkiller is that the weapons were kind of silly and over the top in a lot of ways. And the new Painkiller is not really going to change that. A lot of the weapons are very, very dumb. But, you know, they're very fun to play with. There's a lot of emphasis here on 3-player, like cooperative combat. And a lot of Painkiller is like horde mode in some ways. Fun time. Again, reviews are kind of bear that out as well, and that it's not exactly a super deep game. But, you know, it's a fun time if you have a couple of friends to play with. All right, Bounty Star. And Bounty Star has like a really long second subtitle, but I don't remember what it is, so I'm just going to call it Bounty Star. Bounty Star is Stardew Valley with a mech in some ways. So it's kind of mech combat. You take on kind of different missions to take on like thieves and bandits and what have you in your big mech, while at the same time looking after your household and the ranch and what have you. I think it's a fun time. The combat seemed really interesting. How well it plays out, I don't know. Like I do, and I've talked about this before, when games kind of do a half and half type of thing. Like we're going to do half mech combat, and then we're also going to do half base management. And it's like one of them usually takes a backseat. That's from what I found. That's usually the case. So whether it's the mech combat that takes the backseat or it's the base management that takes the backseat, we'll find out. But yeah, it looks interesting anyway. I haven't actually seen many reviews for it, so don't really know how well it's been received. And then the game that probably is actually just for me, unlike Power Wash Simulator, Full Metal Schoolgirl is from the same developers who make Earth Defense Force, and it is just as over the top as something like that. Full Metal Schoolgirl is an idea that this company has gone a bit rogue, and these two girls have been sent in, robot girls, have been sent in to clean house, basically. And it's wave after wave of combat, very silly anime tropes and a lot of fan service and all of that kind of stuff. It's dumb and it's a bit of fun, and that's kind of why I'm interested in it, because it's just silly and nonsense and what have you. And the EDF games are, yeah, not like amazing, but they're fun. They're a bit of dumb gameplay. Anyway, unfortunately though, it is now time to talk about the worst part of video games, the video game industry. So, Microsoft pushes Xbox division to hit higher profit margins. Management's goal of 30% profit margins for gaming has led to job losses, cancelled projects. So this has come from Jason Schreier for Bloomberg. Reminder that Bloomberg is not a video game publication, typically. So a lot of this article is kind of explaining video game terms and this kind of thing. So we're not going to go into too deep, but do keep in mind that this particular URL that I'm using, and it is in the notes, it'll be in the description, is a gift token. So otherwise, Bloomberg is a subscription site. Anyway, so Microsoft is asking its Xbox gaming division to produce profit margins that are well above the industry average, pressure on its video game makers during a difficult time for the field at large. So this is kind of news that Big Daddy Microsoft told Xbox 2 years ago that, hey, we need you to start hitting a 30% profit margin. And historically, Xbox has struggled to get anywhere close to that. Xbox's average is between 10 and 20, and usually on the lower end. And the industry's average is something like between 15 and 20 kind of thing. So yeah, trying to hit 30% is impossible. It's just not going to happen. But no, Big Daddy wants it to happen. Again, speaking of executives who are out of touch with the whole thing and shouldn't be in their position, but here we are. So over the past 2 years, Microsoft has set an across-the-board goal of 30% accountability margins, which is just a fancy way of saying profit margin. And this has led to Xbox doing all of the crazy things we've kind of seen them do over the last 2 years. Things like jacking up the price of Game Pass, putting up the price of their console, putting games on PlayStation, cancelling a lot of their games, and just a shit ton of layoffs to try to cut costs because they're not going to make those profit margins on selling product because Game Pass has kind of plateaued. And trying to push the price up on the Xbox console and so on might push it a little bit, but really the only way they're going to actually hit that 30% is to drop costs dramatically. And that's where a lot of the layoffs and all the cancellations have come from. The average profit margin in the video game industry is between 17 and 22%. That's according to estimates from the S&P. It's between 10 and 20% over the last 6 years for Xbox. So they've never gotten anywhere close to 30%, basically. Court documents from 2023 show that Microsoft's gaming business had a 12% profit margin in 2022. So that's coming out of the pandemic. That would have been the first kind of downturn after the pandemic. And they're expected to somehow triple that. Okay, good luck with that. So Neil Barber, who's an analyst with the S&P Global, basically said a 30% or better margin is usually reserved for a publisher that is really nailing it. Do we think Xbox is really nailing it right now? Were they really nailing it 2 years ago? Have they ever really nailed it? Maybe during the 360 era, but that was a long, long time ago. So in the past, Xbox was effectively given quite a bit of leeway, really, from Microsoft. I think in a lot of ways, Microsoft didn't really pay much attention to them, and we're largely seeing them as just getting their position into the market, trying to inject themselves into the market and like run at a loss and try to get like high up in sales kind of thing. The Uber model, if you like. And that did work, really, in the 360 era. And it's really like the missteps from the Xbox One onwards have really fucked Xbox over. Anyway, so in the past, Microsoft had told Xbox basically, focus on making the best game possible without worrying too much about finances. And that's kind of the position you'd want them to be in. And arguably, that's what got you things like Halo, Fable, Forza. I was between saying Horizon and Horza, and I couldn't present without saying one or the other. Anyway, that's where you got those games from, and it's also where you got partnerships with other developers, kind of thing, because they could just throw the money at them and get exclusives like early BioWare games, Mass Effect being an Xbox exclusive, Knights of the Old Republic being an Xbox exclusive, this kind of thing. Anyway. Now, with this new mandate that they make 30% profit margin, the division is looking for new ways to cut costs and boost profits. So this is putting most of its games now over onto Nintendo or putting them over onto PlayStation. They cancelled a bunch of projects, as we are well aware of. Again, Bloomberg has to kind of catch people up on these kind of things. So Everwild, Perfect Dark, and Project Blackbird. Many Xbox developers and groups have been presented with this new target. So while the 30% profit threshold isn't necessarily required for literally every single Xbox subsidiary, it somewhat is required for most of them. So what kind of knock-on effect will that have? If they get to the point where they have let everybody they could possibly let go and still actually be able to make games, the games themselves now will have to make a pretty significant profit, which means either you make the game super fucking cheap so that any sales you make are basically profit, or you make the game so broad and so hitting as many bases as possible, Call of Duty, that you get your sales just by sheer volume of people buying it. And that's going to lead to shit games, basically. That's the end of it. Can you make a very good game that is also super cheap? Sure. Tetris. Makes sense that Tetris wasn't exactly cheap to develop at the time. I mean, you can. I mean, you've seen it's like indie darlings making, crazy amounts of sales and what have you. Having said that, though, they're not going to make like corporate fucking profit money. They make enough for that indie dev to be, pretty well off, and that's kind of it. Moving forward, games that are either cheap to make or deemed more likely to generate significant revenue windfalls may take priority over riskier bets, which effectively means we're going to make the games that are either a very sure thing or are crazy cheap. Neither of which sound like stuff BioWare makes. Neither of which sound like stuff Obsidian makes, even. You know, this sounds like Call of Duty. And that's pretty much it. Or some kind of Survivor type thing, like Grounded, I guess, which I feel like is probably cheaper to make than something like Avowed or something like The Outer Worlds that just came out, that kind of thing. Anyway, this will also likely see the hardware division face significant rethinking, which you've already kind of heard. Sarah Bond has already talked about it. There was an interview this week, and we'll talk a little bit about it later, but that the next Xbox will likely be like a premium thing. It's not something they're expecting mass market adoption of. So it might be like a kind of thing of like a very custom high-end PC rather than a console for everybody kind of thing. I think this graph is kind of interesting as well. So Xbox's new target. So the dotted line is the 30% profit margin that they're expecting. And this yellow line, orange line, is the video game industry average. As you can see, it has at no point, even when times were really good, which is 2020, pandemic, everybody was at home playing video games. You know, 2020, 2021, in like that period, still didn't make it. And you can see here, here's the downturn. We came out of the pandemic, and then here's all the layoffs. Here's all people trying to, you know, that very small dip has been responsible for a ton of suffering in the video game industry. Anyway, so yeah, a little bit of a history lesson here of the Xbox 360 when, you know, Xbox was doing very, very well. Console sales were surpassing Sony and Nintendo in the 2000s with the 360. But when they launched the Xbox One and they tried to do this always online DRM thing, and there was just terrible messaging and marketing around the Xbox One that Sony basically just had to say, hey, we don't do any of that, and got their sales really fucking easy. Anyway, launching of the Xbox One in 2013 led to a significant decline in market share. Microsoft now no longer reveals Xbox hardware sales, but the estimate is that PS5 is about double Xbox Series X, and depending on what territory you go, that margin just gets bigger. Like Japan, it's 10-1 or something crazy like that. Xbox has struggled to sell consoles largely because it has failed to develop exclusive games, on par with Nintendo's Legend of Zelda or PlayStation's God of War, both of which won Game of the Year awards and drove significant console sales. There was even, again, as part of that Sarah Bond interview, where she was saying that exclusives are antiquated. No, they're not. You should really talk to Nintendo about that. It's pretty much the reason why people buy Nintendo consoles is to play Nintendo games. That's it. That's largely the reason why they do it. Anyway, Xbox's best hope for a blockbuster game in recent years was 2021's Halo Infinite, but that did not do very well. And really, have they had like a real knock it out of the park game that's an Xbox exclusive? And it just hasn't really happened in a very long time now. Microsoft will announce a new Halo release in an attempt to resuscitate the franchise, which you've already seen. Halo 1 is effectively being remade. Yeah, and then we're going into the kind of the history of their spending since the pandemic and all the acquisitions that Microsoft made. It's a lot of money they spent, and they haven't really seen any of it come back. So they acquired more than a dozen game companies in recent years, including ZeniMax and Activision Blizzard. ZeniMax for $7.5 billion and Activision Blizzard for $69 billion, which is a crazy price to pay for them. The largest game acquisition in history. I don't think that's going to be surpassed anytime soon. Like even the EA one from like the Saudi Arabian one was only 55 billion. Like even that's not enough. And Warner Brothers have put themselves up for sale, but that is like Warner Brothers as a whole. That includes like the TV and film and stuff like that. It's not just the gaming division. So we'll see what price that goes for. But like, if even that isn't 69 billion, then they're like, what the fuck were Microsoft doing? That was way too much money. And I said it at the time when it was acquired that Microsoft are going to want to see a return on that $69 billion. And Call of Duty is not going to do that all by itself. And we're kind of seeing it now. 2023. They acquire Activision Blizzard, and 2023 is when this 30% profit margin came in as well. Like, that was a bad one too, really, for Xbox. The shopping spree has led to increased scrutiny on Xbox from Microsoft executives. The tech company has been prioritizing investment in generative AI and may be less interested in supporting a massive gaming division failing to return big profits. It's kind of interesting that they say they're less interested in a division failing to return big profits when generative AI is absolutely not returning profits. It is draining money. These guys are just hosing money into generative AI, expecting that if they put enough money in, maybe eventually they'll start making money. And it's like, no. How many years have you had at this, guys? It still hasn't taken wide adoption. People still are like, oh, it's okay for like these 1-2 very specific things that are literally no cost to anybody and you could do yourself with no issue. Like, it's not revolutionizing anything. And you're still shoveling money into it. Anyway. Again, a little bit here. We talked about this a little while ago, but the Game Pass thing has kind of arguably hurt Xbox, especially if they're going to be looking for their 30% profit margin. The only real way to do that then is to push up the subscription price, which they did. Hasn't exactly been received very well, requiring all Xbox games to appear on the company's subscription service, the Xbox Game Pass. The change has hurt Xbox game sales, according to the people they spoke to. Xbox offers its developers a credit, which it calls a member-weighted value, and is calculated based on several factors. So this is how third-party developers and how they get them onto Game Pass is that they offer them the member-weighted value or the or developer credit kind of thing, which is basically, we'll give you all this money to go on Game Pass. So as a kind of, that's the way to describe it. It's basically saying like you're trading unknown number of sales you could make yourself on Steam, on GOG, on Epic, on the Xbox Game Store, on the PlayStation Store, whatever. You're trading all of that for this Xbox developer credit, which is guaranteed money. But it's probably not as much as you could make sales. But on the other hand, you may not make that much in sales depending on how marketing goes, depending on how, when you put your game out, like, it's unknown how much you'd make. The problem is the several factors that they use. One of those is the number of hours that Game Pass players collectively spend on your game. You can see where this is going, because obviously this is going to favor games in which players can spend the most amount of hours, which leads to bloat, which leads to busy work, which leads to games requiring you to log in every day, which leads to games effectively turning it into a second job because that's how they make money off the Game Pass. Does that sound like a good does that sound like a healthy video game industry when all of the games are unnecessarily long and grindy because they're on Game Pass? Anyway, there's some other news saying that like putting their games on different platforms has worked out well for them. Indiana Jones The Great Circle sold better on PlayStation 5. Arguably, that's because because Game Pass isn't part of PlayStation. So if you wanted to play it, you have to buy it. Whereas if you're on Xbox or PC and you have Game Pass, you didn't have to put any additional money in. So kind of like by default, it was gonna do better on PlayStation. Anyway. What's this last thing? I forget what this last thing is now. In July, call with investors, operating income in the division that includes Xbox rose 34% for the quarter that ended in June. Okay, so yeah, they're finding that this continued prioritization of higher margin opportunities is somewhat working out well for them. But this is something that only includes Xbox. It's not entirely just Xbox. But yeah, basically, the future of Xbox is going to be cheap games that are a guaranteed revenue return for them. So something that has broad appeal, nothing niche. And and jacking up the price on everything as much as possible. You know, they're going to try to squeeze as much money out of it as they can because they're having to hit something that historically they've never hit and is triple the profit margin that they made 2-3 years ago. They're in a bit of trouble. Anyway, sticking with them. So this is the Sarah Bond article I was talking about. This is with Mashable. And she talked about a couple of different things on it, but one of them was the exclusives thing. So in Xbox's view, the idea of games being exclusive to a single platform has become outdated. We're really seeing people evolve way past that. Like, the biggest games in the world are available everywhere. You look at Call of Duty, you look at Minecraft, Fortnite, Roblox. These are not the pinnacle of the video game art form, arguably. That's not to say that any of the exclusive necessarily are, but when people say, what's my favorite game? Unless you're 12, you're probably not saying any of these. You know, arguably they're not even in the top 10. Anyway, that's actually what's really driving community in gaming. That's where people gather, they have experiences, and the idea of locking it to one store or one device is antiquated for most people. Now, she is also honing in on multiplayer games. And also somewhat, like, and it's not to say that there are no exclusives that are multiplayer. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are many. I don't typically go for multiplayer, so they're not going to immediately stand out in my head. But what I would think of games that are exclusive to one particular platform, picking them out. Obviously, there's all the Nintendo exclusives, Mario, Legend of Zelda, Kirby, Metroid, etc. I'm sure I've missed tons, and vast majority of them are single player. PlayStation exclusives, God of War, Horizon, Last of Us, and older PlayStation exclusives. Even third-party exclusives, again, single player games. They haven't been multiplayer games. So this idea that you're locking them in, community, what have you, the community from single player games comes from people talking about them. Comes from people joining message boards, talking to your friends about it online, or you go back to my childhood, talking to your friends on the schoolyard about these games, and oh, have you played such and such, and oh, I haven't played that yet. And did you know that there's a nude cheat for Tomb Raider? And it's like, no, there isn't. No, there isn't, Sean, you son of a bitch. Fucking played that game for hours trying to unlock it. Anyway, you want to be able to play with your friends anywhere. No, I don't. Regardless of what they're on. And we're really leaning into that with this experience because it just opens up another way for you to play. So that was in response to exclusives, which I think was read a little bit wrong, or just didn't want to talk about it. But that was really more of a case of multiplayer games, and that multiplayer games should have crossplay. Like, that's a different question, Sarah. Anyway, there's another thing that came out during the interview, I think, but it's like Satya Nadella talking about how Xbox's shift to go multi-format, multi-platform has worked out well for them. And this, to be quite honest, isn't necessarily a feather in the cap of Xbox so much as it is a sick burn on PlayStation. Xbox had more games among the PlayStation Store's 25 best-selling titles than Sony did. That's because Sony didn't put out any fucking games. Put out like 2 fucking games. And Xbox had a ton of games that had come out already on other stores, and they were able to just push them out then. So, like, it's not the feather in the cap that Microsoft think it is, and it is very much a burn on current Sony. Anyway, moving on. We're still sticking with Xbox. Xbox increases price of developers' kits by 33%. So not only do we not want people buying our console anymore, we also don't want them making games for our console anymore. This is a very small article here from Game Developer. The main thing is coming from The Verge. The main story, if you're subscribed to them, you can read it yourself. I'm not, so I wasn't able to read it. Anyway, the Xbox Developer Kit, or the XDK, is, if you're not familiar, it is effectively an Xbox, but it has a bunch of additional hardware. We won't go into it, but it allows you to develop on the Xbox itself and run your games in debug mode and stuff like that. It is effectively a super beefy Xbox, and that's why it's, $2,000. Yeah, you need this to develop games for the Xbox. Like, you need it. It's required, basically. So you've effectively just made the barrier to entry for Xbox development go to $2,000 instead of $1,500. Now, you might think that if you were planning to make a game for Xbox, that's fine. But you have to think that like every single one of your developers will need one. And you're talking about teams that are hundreds, 200 people in some cases for stuff like Ubisoft, EA, the bigger developers. That number that number gets really big really quickly. So yeah, that's not great. Anyway, this hasn't been confirmed yet, but it is largely assumed to be true. A letter was received from a bunch of developers basically saying that these adjustments reflect the macroeconomic developments, yada, yada, yada. We remain committed to providing high quality tools and support for your development efforts, but now you have to pay more for it. Again, going back to the 30% profit margin, it doesn't just mean players. It also means developers. They're going to squeeze that rock as hard as they fucking can to get as much money out of it. Anyway, we're going to leave Microsoft alone for a bit and we'll talk about Valve instead. Or specifically Counter-Strike. So Counter-Strike skin market plummets $2 billion as Valve makes trade-up change. So this is a story all about how my life got turned. No, that's a different one. This is a story. So Valve have recently changed how skins work in Counter-Strike. So if you're not familiar with it, skins in Counter-Strike up until now had been a kind of a loot box thing. You kind of just roll the dice and hopefully you got something good out of it. And usually you got something shit. That's the way it works. And this led to a black market of people hoarding the good skins, if you like, the really covert quality skins as they were called. These were like the epics, if you like, the really high value ones. Hoarding them and then selling them on a black market. You would also have streamers who would do things like unboxing of their loot boxes, and it was like a big draw. You'd have people gambling on it and that kind of thing. There's this horrible undermarket to this whole thing that Valve have been kind of tolerating and also kind of wanting to shut down because it's a massive legal liability for them as well. So you can argue that this is either a great quality of life improvement for people who already play Counter-Strike, and it's a better way for them to get highly sought after skins, arguably a more democratizing way to do it. Instead of having to go on the market and, pay for it, you can just play the game like as it was intended and just do it that way. Or you could also argue that this is Valve trying to effectively undercut the market in some way. So the way this has changed is players can now offer up, hang on, I'll read it here now. So in an update to how players can obtain and trade Counter-Strike skins, Valve has made it so that players can now offer up 5 covert quality skins for a guaranteed knife or pair of gloves. And because it's a first-person game, it's all you see about your character anyway. Before that update, these were some of the most valuable items on the market, and that's where it's kind of come down from, is that the gloves and the knives skins is what people were making money off, like selling either on a black market or just hoarding it and hodling and hoping to make even more money. And this has effectively meant that they're not worthless, but they're certainly not worth what they used to be. So items once considered rare and expensive have crashed in value, slicing some players' inventories a considerable amount. So the nature of this market, yada yada, dubious practices, skin gambling, trading, off-platform trading, that kind of thing. You would have seen a lot of this in like the FIFA foot stuff, foot coins and selling and trading footballers effectively on the market. It's the same kind of thing, but more of it and going on longer because the game is older. Some of these skins can rack up huge price tags, hundreds of thousands of dollars from private collectors who've just been hoarding them, like a dragon or what have you. Anyway, this change has effectively had the skins market value to shatter, dropping by $2 billion overnight. Now, I would argue that these are worthless because you can't take them out of the game and you can't sell them on officially. You can't trade them in for actual money. You can't convert them to real dollar bucks unless, of course, you do this third-party thing. So in some ways, they're both worthless and also very valuable in a weird way. And this just feels gross. Anyway, before the change, the skin market was estimated to be worth as much as $5 billion, and now it's worth significantly less than that anyway. So for some, this is like a drastic financial issues, like they're using this to like pay off their bills and, you know, pay their mortgage. We just play Counter-Strike Go and we get these skins and we just sit on them until they're worth a lot of money and then sell them. And for others, this is like, yeah, great. I don't need to pay a shit ton of money for these cosmetics. They're much easier to get. I don't need to grind the shit out of the game anymore and so on. Depending on which side of the bracket you're on, this is either a very good change or a very bad change. And then from a competitive perspective, this will obviously have issues with like the streamers who do like the streams where they open stuff, where they do gambling, or they do sponsorships on the gambling and so on and so forth. In my opinion, this is a net good for the game and the game industry in general. Getting away from these skin gambling and off-platform stuff is only a good thing, in my opinion. Yeah, let the game be a game and not have the game be a weird investment vehicle, please. Moving on. Ubisoft asks devs to lay themselves off. So this is a new one. They're so bored that they're just gotten so tired of laying you guys off. How about you lay yourselves off instead? So Ubisoft is asking an unknown number of developers from Massive Entertainment, who are responsible for The Division, Star Wars Outlaws, and a couple of other games, to voluntarily lay themselves off. Of course, this is not what they're calling it, but this is what effectively it is. As part of our ongoing evolution and long-term planning, we have recently realigned our teams and resources to strengthen our roadmap, blah, 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 blah. To support this transition responsibly, feel like there should be an asterisk there, we introduce a voluntary career transition program, i.e. quitting, giving eligible team members the opportunity to take their next career step on their own terms, supported by a comprehensive package that includes financial and career assistance. This is taking severance before you're laid off. That's what this is. Now, depending on where Massive are based, I'm not sure where Massive are based. Ubisoft is a French company, but I think Massive are based in Canada. So they potentially don't have the same labor protections. And in some cases, maybe if you're going to be laid off anyway, arguably you might want to take this. You know, you can't exactly fault somebody for doing it, but also it's a pretty shit thing to do, Ubisoft, when you have just taken a massive investment from Tencent and now you still want to lay people off. Anyway, Massive was acquired by Ubisoft in 2008, bought them off Activision Blizzard, and were initially part of supporting Assassin's Creed and Far Cry before they made their own game, The Division. And their Snowdrop engine has been powering a lot of other Ubisoft games since then. And then Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora, and Star Wars Outlaws have not exactly delivered commercially. Critically, maybe. I think Avatar was pretty well received critically, but I don't think it did particularly well commercially. And Star Wars Outlaws, I don't think it was received well in either position. Yeah, but here, pointing out, Vantage Studios has just been opened, massive investment from Tencent, and yet we still want to have layoffs from people. Anyway, Massive appears to be on the chopping block, though it's unclear how many actual developers will be laid off as part of this new initiative. The studio says it will remain focused on delivering, and I honestly thought this was a joke, delivered promised content within the Division universe, The Division 2, The Division 2 Survivors, The Division Resurgence, and the eventual Division 3. I thought that was a joke. I thought there was going to be a Division Electric Boogaloo thing thrown in there, but no, those are all real games, except Division 3. We don't know if that's a thing. Fuck's sake. Anyway, moving on. Okay, more than 1,200 games journalists have left the media in 2 years. The last 2 years. Left the media is a bit of a euphemism for laid off. Anyway, so this is coming from Press Engine's database. So Press Engine are a service that a lot of developers use and publishers use to send keys to video game journalists so they can play their games, do reviews, do previews, that kind of thing. So it's like a in-between, a man-in-the-middle kind of service to facilitate that kind of thing. So because of that, Press Engine have the details of a lot of games journalists, as you might imagine. So their database kind of shows that, yeah, there's been a drastic drop in journalism, in video game journalism in the last 2 years. So Press Engine's database of tier 1 publications, these are the ones that would be like Kotaku, Eurogamer, IGN, GameSpot, that kind of thing. Not like your guy who does it out of his basement, like me. Like actual people with real jobs. Anyway, the global pool of game journalists has declined by 25% in just 2 years. And the vast majority of these departures have been from those tier 1 publications, specialist games websites like IGN, Polygon, or GamePot. It says GamePot. I don't think that's a real thing. Anyway, GameSpot, presumably. If amateur and part-time or freelance writers are included, and to be honest, I think I'm even beneath all of those. Anyway, this assumes they actually get keys. I don't get keys. Anyway, more than 4,000 people since October 2023. This highlights a significant drop in the numbers of people writing about video games since the pandemic. Media owners like IGN, Fandom, Gamer Network, and Valnet, that should be not Valent, have all cut jobs in the past year. In fact, Valnet cut like a couple of hundred jobs just this week. So this is coming from Gareth Williams, who's co-founder of Press Engine. A culmination of a number of factors have cost video games journalism some of its brightest talents. The COVID highs followed by lack of diversification in content, diversification of advertising spend, Google's helpful content update, which I think is a sarcasm, summaries, and AI have all contributed to where we are now. So what they're talking about here is video game journalism becoming, there's a word for it where you're like friendly to the industry you're meant to be reporting on, and I forget what it is. But it's doing, you know, kind of basic things like reviews and previews and guides and all this kind of stuff, and not doing like journalism, has kind of led to people not going to those sites or going to different sites. And it's like when you can just type in game guide for whatever and you don't particularly care what comes up, you know, you're not going to be beholden to any particular website. Whereas if you're getting good journalism and well-written articles from a particular website, you are more likely to come back to that website, which obviously would help with ads. And the Google's helpful content update, which is the little summary box that appears at the top. And this is an issue for journalism in general, not just video game journalism. But once people read that, they might not go to the website anymore. And the AI one is even worse because the one they read is wrong. Anyway, fan-led media might be the simplest route to consolidate revenue for publishers and secure the future for staff, but it's only the start. So fan-led media being having your readers fund subscription model, having your readers fund the actual website. In a consumer world where ad blocking is standard and games as a service and social media are communication tools where children and adults form their relationships, video games media needs to evolve and innovate. Support your favorite publications before you don't have the choice. Veteran game journalist Alex Donaldson, who owns RPG Site, had more to say on it. We're now seeing an increasing number of brands ran off the road entirely through a confluence of factors, but certainly primarily led by search engine changes, Google AI, for instance, user behavior changes, people getting their news from ChatGPT, which isn't news at all. For quality games media, I continue to believe that the best form of stability is dedicated reader bases to remove reliance on funds, a hybrid of direct reader funding and advertisement. If people want to keep reading quality content from full-time professionals, they need to support it, or lose it. And then there's a second one here to basically say that management of a lot of these publications is also to blame, because these are people who just think that it's easy to just print money from a journalism output and don't have a journalism background. A not insignificant proportion of the losses the games media has suffered, I strongly feel, could have been avoided with better management, clarity, and more realistic expectations on the part of proprietors. Even this week, we've seen talented people with a high work output laid off. This is talking about Valnet. By a larger parent that doesn't seem to have a solid strategy, doesn't know what they're doing, shouldn't be in the business in the first place. The best protection against these sort of losses for the media at large is a healthy slate of independent yada yada. Support your favorite outlet. Cool. Moving on. Okay, so last thing, Remedy CEO stepping down after 9 years. So this is largely because of FBC Firebreak just not doing well, and the company effectively recording a loss, I think. It's either a loss or significantly less profit than they did last time, something like that. Anyway, he's stepping down with, so it says here he's stepping down with immediate effect, but he's also allowed to stick around to work for a bit. I guess not as CEO, but it doesn't say what exactly his job is. Anyway, he'll continue to work for the developer for an agreed transition period. It's funny that they don't get laid off when things go wrong. Now, I don't think Remedy has actually had any layoffs as a result of Firebreak. And to be fair to Remedy, the person who made the mistake is actually taking the fall here. But usually, this isn't what happens. Remedy's co-founder and current chief product officer, Marcus Mackey, will take on the role of CEO. He was formerly chairman of the board. Henry Osterland will be taking over as chairman of the board while there's this transition period. Anyway, last week, Remedy announced it would be adjusting its financial outlook for 2025 because of weak sales of FBC Firebreak. So that's literally the reason why the guy's stepping down. It's one game, did not great, and he's taking the fall for it, instead of having all of your developers take the fall for it instead. Arguably, this is actually somewhat laudable position, but also I don't think he's going to hurt too much because he does get to like hang around for a bit. Anyway, we will leave. We'll leave Ninja Gaiden to play in the background. I'm trying to think which of the games is the biggest game that came out this week. It's probably arguable that it's Outer Worlds 2, but I prefer to look at Ninja Gaiden 4. Anyway, that was your weekly news recap for October 20th to 24th, 26th rather. So some pretty cool stuff from the Indie Horror Showcase and the Galaxies Showcase. Again, I only highlighted a couple of games there. There were way more that were showing off at the showcase. If I went through all of the games, we would still be here. Yeah, Project Tau looks interesting. We need to see a little bit more of it. If it truly is like a Dragon's Dogma clone, that will be amazing. I would love that. If it's another Souls-y type game, okay, that's fine. There's so many of them now. I kind of feel like a little bit of diversification might be good, but anyway, we'll see how that works out for them. Halo being on PlayStation is kind of crazy, really. It's just been so long that it's been held up as like people looking for the Halo killer, you know, like PlayStation having looking for the Halo killer had been just a thing, a continuing talking point in the industry for such a long time because Halo was such a big thing for Xbox. And now the Halo killer is here and it's Halo. It's Halo. If anything, the Halo killer is Microsoft itself. But anyway, the profit margin push thing from higher up in Microsoft kind of does explain why Xbox has been just being really fucking weird the last couple of years. The multi-platform push, the high prices on everything, the Game Pass and shitification, like it does really kind of neatly explain all of it. And it's kind of almost disappointing that the reason for the whole thing was just more money, please. Like that's it. That's all it was. Really, just textbook capitalism. It's almost, you know, it's like you're expecting a cool story twist, and it's just like, yeah, he's just evil, lol. It's like, oh, really? It's so boring. It's so mundane. But at least it explains it, and we can now say, pretty much going forward, you can expect Xbox to be doing much the same thing that they're doing now, which is squeezing as much blood out of that stone as they possibly can. I don't think things will necessarily improve for them going forward. The CSGO thing, again, like I said, I think it's a net good. Yes, some people have been fucked over, but also video games should not be being used as an investment vehicle. This is how capitalism has infected the video game industry in general, is looking at it as an investment vehicle instead of just works of entertainment and or works of art, if you prefer, and just leave it at that. Just let games be games. They don't have to be investment vehicles for people. Anyway, I can't think of what else we were doing that week. Anyway, that's it from me. Not sure if we'll be back We may miss next week. Not sure. I think I'm away. But if not, I will see you guys next week. All right. Have a good one. Talk to you guys later. Bye.